pandemic will continue till the end of 2022. Therefore, the global economy will not be estimated to recover earlier than 2023. Today, we are going to discuss this important issue by this online webinar under the title of The Impact of Coronavirus on Economy, Financial and Manufacturing Sectors, Perspective of Sri Lanka and India. This event conducted by the Applied Finance Postgraduate Programs of the University of Sri Jayawardenepura. Applied Finance Postgraduate is a leading postgraduate program in the country. I'm proud to say here that our graduate contributed significantly to the development of the business financial sector in Sri Lanka and other parts of the world. Now, I'm moving into give a brief introduction about this seminar, this online webinar. The main objective of this webinar is to provide contemporary knowledge under the crisis situation for our postgraduate students, academic staff members, and the community. Structure of today's programs consists of two parts. The first part allocates for the panel discussion with a presentation. Maximum, it takes 1 hour. And the second part is question and answer session. It takes also another 1 hour, altogether 2 hours. This program's live streaming via Facebook and the university YouTube. So the viewers who are looking the Facebooks and the YouTube can join with us. You're also welcome. The main media partner is Daily FT. It is my great pleasure, privilege to introduce Professor Sampath Amaratunga, who is a current chairman, University Grant Commission of Sri Lanka, former Vice Chancellor of the University of Sri Jayawardenepura. Today, he is going to act as the co-moderator of this program. This is a rare opportunity to have him here because he's a very busy person under this prevailing condition. Professor Sampath, it's over to you. You can continue the session right now. Oh, hold on. Okay, so you can. Sampath can't hear. Can you unmute? Okay.
I think now it's okay. Right.
Okay.
Good afternoon. And thank you very much, Professor Vasantha, giving me the opportunity to moderate this eminent panelists for the discussion. And Professor Pandey is there. Delighted to see him, our very good friend who have come to Jayawardenepura Management Faculty several times. And we have never ever expected a lockdown of the global economy to this extent. And today, all over the world is closed down for economic activities for great extent. So we are going to discuss about future of our global economy, especially Sri Lanka and India. Let me introduce our learned panelists today. Professor I.M. Pandey from India. I will give you a very brief introduction about his career. Professor I.M. Pandey obtained his PhD from Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi. He is currently working as the Director General at Delhi School of Business and Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies in India. He was professor in Indian Institute of Management, well known as IIM, Ahmedabad, for 25 years, where he also served as the director, dean, chairman of doctoral and fellow program, and chairman for finance and accounting area. There are so many things, so many lines to read, but I will go to our next panelist, Mr. Dhammika Nanayakkara. Mr. Dhammika Nanayakkara is currently working as the Assistant Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and he has served the Central Bank for more than 24 years and worked in Department of Macro-Prudential Economics, Public Debt and Bank Supervision. With his experience in core central banking area of financial system, stability, supervision and regulation of financial institutions, debt and portfolio management, and international finance, foreign reserves management, and implementation of monetary policy. So our next panelist is a very good friend, Mr. Nandika Buddhipala. Mr. Nandika Buddhipala is the Chief Financial Officer of the Commercial Bank of Ceylon PLC and have over 25 years post-qualifying experience in the banking, telecommunication, and audit and assurance industries. He obtained his first degree, BSc in Business Administration, and postgraduate diploma in management from University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. He has his MBA, MA in Financial Economics, MSc in Financial Mathematics from University of Colombo. He is a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, FCA, Institute of Chartered Management Accountants, FCMA of Sri Lanka. So let me introduce our final panelist, Mr. Harsha Premaratna from the industry with a background in capital markets, economics, strategic finance. Hasita brings leadership to the overall finance function of Brandix Group. In his current capacity as Chief Financial Officer, he also oversees overall guidance of Brandix India Apparel City, overlooks the group's JVs and investments and services as director in many of the subsidiaries with the Brandix universe. He holds an MBA in International Finance, BSc in Computer Science, Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, CIMA UK, Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, ACCA UK, and the Institute of Certified Management Accountants. So in a situation like this, since Professor Pandey is participating from the Indian end, I just brief about the Sri Lankan economy today. It's a 90 billion US dollar economy, and agriculture, the contribution is 7%, and clearly 25% of the workforce from the agriculture. You can then clearly understand the poverty or the low income of our agriculture. Then industry just 30% and 60% services. And this is the dashboard of our economy. And export imports, we have a huge gap between these two, and huge trade account balance is appearing every year. And without taking much time to talk about the Sri Lankan economy, so straight away we'll go to Professor Pandey. I'm not going to ask any question from Professor Pandey, because Professor Pandey is already scheduled an excellent PowerPoint presentation for all of us. Then after that, he's going to deliberate his discussion. So Professor Pandey, over to you. Professor Pandey.
Is that okay, sir?
Good afternoon, because I was muted. Thank you very much, Professor.
Hi.
Well, it's an honor to be here amongst very well-known people from your central bank, your corporates, and the academicians here. I would like to thank you, Vasant Pereira, for inviting me, because this gives me a good opportunity to understand Sri Lankan economy very closely. Of course, Indian and Sri Lankan economy, they are more or less same in terms of when you are talking about agriculture base. The only difference perhaps is that we are much larger in population and size than Sri Lanka. And our economy is almost 2 trillion US dollars right now. Of course, our government's plans were to take it to 5 trillion in next 5 years. But unfortunately, this COVID has slowed down the economic growth. As you said, Professor Amartunge, just now, it has slowed down everywhere worldwide. Now, I would show you certain data and talk about the Indian economy. So I will go over to my PowerPoint presentation. So I'm sharing my this PowerPoint to you. Okay. All right. Now, so actually this, as you were mentioning, Professor, there has been global slowdown. Even the mighty countries, G20, for example, it's expecting a growth of 0.5%. US maybe even below 1%, although their estimates are maybe 2%. In China is again a huge economy, and it will recede to 3.3%. That is the estimate of various international agencies. India, of course, was growing at a very fast rate till 2018. And then, of course, we witnessed that even the world was slowing down. The world economies were slowing down. So our growth rate came down from 7.5 or 6% to 5.3% in 2019. And now various agencies are estimating it. For example, Moody's estimate is 2.5%. But then there is some other international agency which was putting it at 2%. And internally, people discuss it. We are saying that depends on certain conditions, but it may go down as low as 1 or 2% or 1.5%. Of course, when you go by estimates, optimistic estimates, then people believe that perhaps it may go up over 3% after 1.5 years. Of course, India's unemployment, you were mentioning about poverty in Sri Lanka. India, it's a huge country, 130 billion people. 20% of the people are below poverty line here, which is a large number. And that size would be larger than that of many countries. Now, there is a problem of unemployment. Already by 2019, the unemployment was around 8%, 8.7%. And now the latest estimate in April show that it's 27%. And if you go by some reports in the media, for example, I think it's exceeding 30%. There are several reasons for that. Of course, because we have so many states in this country and they have to manage their funds also. Now, what they have done is they have hiked the petrol and diesel prices, which after lockdown is lifted, I think may have bad impact on industry because it will become expensive. Now, when we look at the financial markets, we find there is turbulence everywhere, whether these are developed economies or it's Indian economy. Same thing perhaps is happening in Sri Lanka. We have two great indices, several indices. Of course, we have sector-wise indices also, but then we have BSE, Bombay Stock Exchange 500, and then we have NSE like the Dow Jones 30, we have National Stock Exchange 50. And I will show the charts, their price behavior. It became very, very, otherwise stock markets are a little bit volatile all the time. but there has been a significant drop recently after March when we started lockdown. Even our Indian rupee and dollar, it has become volatile, and we see no possibility of any fresh equity or debt at all. Nobody is there to buy. Now, if you look at the Dow Jones, for example, if this chart is visible to you, you will find that this is 6 months chart, and it's going up, and now it has gone down. Actually, on around 14th of March, it was very, very low, maybe 15th or 16th of March, very, very low. It picked up a little bit, and then now it stands here at 23,883. Similarly, if I show you Bombay Stock Exchange, same pattern you will find actually. So our lockdown started in March, 22nd March actually, although I call it off from 14th itself. And now we find that again at the same period, it's one of the lowest here. Now it picked up a little bit. And once the Prime Minister announced that certain sectors partially can be opened, it picked up a little bit. And again, it stands at 31. Actually, it was at its highest for last 2-3 years actually, and people made a lot of money during that particular period. We had a lot of FDIs coming into India, and now this has again dropped. Same is the story of National Stock Exchange. We call it Nifty. So it is those 50 same. You will find the same kind of a pattern. Look at the dollar Indian rupee. Of course, it has been volatile all the time. There was not very special effect of COVID. It was ranging around 73 to 76. So it's around 76 right now. Now, when we look at the impact, if I conclude it, Nifty 50 and SPBSC Sensex lost over 4,846 points and 16,393 respectively. This works out 39% in both cases actually. And now it is an estimate that the earnings will be reduced by 10% as far as Nifty 50 companies are concerned. This is going to introduce further volatility. Obviously, there would be no funds coming to the industry. Our capitalization ratio was ranging at 70 to 80% till financial year 19. It has dropped down to 79%. And I personally think that it would go down further. What's happening in the banks and the mutual funds, for example? Now, in banks, of course, it's happening in most of the developing countries. India has a lot of non-performing assets. They piled up. And last few years, we had some scams. Some big borrowers, they ran away to UK or other countries with lots of money in debt. And therefore, the Reserve Bank, the earlier Reserve Bank governor, of course, it started with Raghuram Rajan, who happened to be my student in IIM Ahmedabad long ago. Now, he said that banks need to clean up their balance sheets. So our banks were busy in cleaning up their balance sheet, and then this menace started all over the world. So it has halted the normal operations of the bank. There are very few depositors. There are few borrowers also right now because the businesses are closed down. Therefore, what is happening is that investors are losing their confidence. It's a high volatility. Share prices are declining. The trends are bad. So actually, I may have some chart which will show you how the stocks of banks were performing. They were the same. They were dooming the same way as the overall exchange is doing. Now, as far as the mutual funds are concerned, actually, the debt funds are into difficulty. One of them, that is Templeton. Franklin Templeton closed down one of its debt scheme because there was too much of demand. People started selling, and there was problem of the liquidity. It brought a kind of lack of confidence in the minds of the investors. Of course, Reserve Bank of India, which is the central bank, took certain steps. So again, mutual funds are into doldrums right now. How our central bank therefore reacted? Actually, the lockdown was, I think it was announced 18th of March perhaps, and 22nd of March, Reserve Bank immediately came up with these relief measures. Although industries were closed down and they were not operating. Now the repo rate was reduced by 75 basis points, so it has reduced by a little more than 1%. Reduction in reserve repo, 90 basis points, brings it down to 4%. Then banks were allowed by Reserve Bank of India to defer payment of EMI on home, all kinds of personal loans, 3 months, in order to reduce the stress of the individuals who had borrowed from the banks. And they were also allowed to defer interest on working capital, because working capital needs of commercial banks meet, and particularly the micro require a lot of working capital, and the main source for that is banks, and therefore Reserve Bank thought it appropriate that they would defer this working capital repayments for 3, because cash flow is a problem with everybody. The cash reserve ratio was also reduced. And very interestingly, that was little later, special liquidity facility for mutual funds. When this debacle happened, in case of Franklin Templeton, they came up with this Indian rupees 500,000 billion were kept for this, which means that this money will be lent to the banks, and banks in turn will help these kinds of schemes so that they pay to the investors, and if they get into problems, it will help them. Now, what were the objectives? These were the objectives: to increase liquidity in the market. Once lockdown is lifted, then there has to be liquidity, and thus the companies should be able to borrow from the banks. But meanwhile, they need some relief. So that is what they did. They thought that they will reduce the volatility through these measures. Now, cash reserve means that more money will be available. When you reduce cash reserve, you keep less as reserve with the Reserve Bank of India, and that money becomes available in the market. Then to ease financial distress of companies and improve functioning the financial market. Whether it will bring those desired objectives or not, we have yet to see it, but at least preemptive actions have been taken by Reserve Bank of India. Even the government of India announced 1.7 trillion, which is equal to 22 billion US dollar relief for poor. As I said, that we have major problem of people below poverty line and otherwise also, particularly the migrant workers. India is a country where these workforce comes from rural areas to the urban areas. They go to all kinds of states like Bombay, Madras, they go to Karnataka, they come to Gujarat. And now these migrant workers, it's a big problem right now for India. Though we are into lockdown, but they are stuck in these respective states. They don't have money and food to eat, although government has made all kinds of provisions, but still government perhaps is not able to reach so many people, and it has become a big problem. Therefore, to reduce the stress, 1.7 trillion, it's given in terms of employment benefits, food. We have several schemes which were started during Congress regime. They have been refined by this government, and employment, food scheme, organized sector relief in social security, because of cash crunch, they are not able to deposit, let's say, the what we call provident fund in the accounts of the workers, because it's legally obligatory on their part. And similarly, the RBI was motivated to come with the relief. And so, but then the question which people are raising in our country, are these measures enough? So now I'll give you the brief examples of the manufacturing sector, how they are suffering. I have picked up the most important ones, which are contributing very significantly to the growth of this country. Auto is one of them. We find auto and real estate perhaps are the barometers of growth. Perhaps those people who are interested in doing, let's say, some econometric study, and if they want to go back and see the pattern, they will find that if you find slowdown in some of these sectors, the growth, the anticipated growth will come down, and actually it happens. So this company, actually this particular sector is worth 104 billion US dollar. And every day they have large amount of revenue which they have been generated. Let's look at this figure. 49% of manufacturing sector is contributed by auto. And of course, 7.5% of the GDP is contributed by them. They were increasing at a very phenomenal high rate. Of course, it slowed down again in 2018. Already the inventories were piling up, and now they have piled up much more because of suspended activities. Every day they are losing around 130 to 150 billion rupees. Now, another one is FMCG growth. You see, because it also contributes a large percentage in the GDP, and rural consumption is 36% in this country. It was growing at 15 to 12 to 15%. Now the growth has come down to 8%, and it is expected to shrink further. Government, of course, had allowed longer, some times ago, 100% FDI. It is very, very sensitive to consumption expenditure. And if people are not getting salaries, and if the poor people are unemployed, this consumption, which is 36%, may become even much, much less. So that's the problem. Real estate, again, they were piling up their inventory. There were scams, unfortunately. And when everything was cleaned up and they were in a mood to sell and loosen their inventories, this COVID came, and this have really intensified their problem. They need heavy dose of capital, actually. Otherwise, the sector will again may not grow very fast. Now, last example is that of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, because it contributes almost 30% of our exports, 48% of our exports, and 29% of the total GDP is contributed by them, almost one third. It's a major employment generator. Right now, there are 110. Because we still use lakhs and crores, so we say it's between 10 to 15 crores. So you can say, perhaps, I don't know whether this conversion is correct or not. So it's 110 million to around 150 million. They were employed in 2019, and now the unemployment is so high. As I gave you the figure, 27% unemployment, a large number of the workers from MSEME sector have become jobless. Although government said that salary has to be paid. Everyone paid March salary. Now on the television, we see every day, they say even if government arrests us, we are not able to, because we don't have cash. We can't pay salaries of these workers. So the problem is huge. It's a huge country. So, and they always suffer. Otherwise, also in normal time, working capital is a problem for them. And this has again become, well, I think I also thought retail sector, because it contributes 22% of GDP. Again, the story is the same. So I can go over. Now, so what are the possibilities? The possibilities are, that is academic anticipation, that large companies perhaps, maybe to some extent, wither away the impact once they open up their businesses because of sheer size, revenues, volume, and operations. Of course, everybody is anticipating it will be slow in 2020, may pick up at 2021. Food and pharmaceutical was not in that bad condition. Still, people were buying online, and there were provisions made by government that some of these essential services, shops will remain open. So, for example, I myself, I got from Amazon, I got from this street shopkeeper some stuff. So they were operating, but not fully. Now, I think this sector, after sometimes little bit breathing time, they will pick up quite fast. And they have started learning about online shopping also, not the small, what we call kirana shops, but definitely these big companies like Hindustan Unilever, ITC, etc. Already they were doing online, and they have increased that. IT, again, communication, internet, they were in great demand actually, and they will push further their growth. Actually, it will pick up fast, because I think even education sector now, even if lockdown is lifted, for example, just today I wrote to my faculty colleagues that even if it's lifted, we are not going to leave online classes. We will supplement our what we call classroom classes with the online. So that would increase. I think demand will pick up, and education institution, private institution like ours, fortunately we don't have problem of money right now, because these are sons and daughters of reasonably rich people, and they pay salaries, they pay fees on time. Auto will take great time to pick up actually, because nobody will be buying cars, and particularly the luxury cars, I think out of question for next 2-3 years. Now, so that's what we think. MSMEs, unless government supports, will take time. Okay, Reserve Bank needs to do much more. Government needs to do much more in this particular case. All in all, the growth in India during and after COVID-19, particularly after COVID-19, will start recovering after August, September. That is our estimate, and is expected to be saucer shaped. Some people think it will be V shaped, but I thought that it is going to be saucer shaped. It will start increasing, and then there would be a little bit constant. It will not increase at very fast rate. That will give breathing time to the industry, and after that they will pick up. So then these are challenges, of course. Still, these are the challenges: agriculture, farmers, agribusiness. In spite of all,
I think there is some technical faults come with that, and it's very hard to change the technology. It happens, this kind of decisions going on. Shall we wait a few minutes? Couple of minutes?
But he's online.
Yeah, it's
Professor.
online.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Sampath, shall we move into the next?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Yes. So after that, Professor Pandey can continue. Yes. Yes. Then Mr. Dhammika Nanayakkara, hope you are online. Hello.
Dhammika, can we hear?
Vasanta, could you please check whether he is online?
Dhammika, hold on. Yes, hold on. I think. Dhammika, right? You can talk.
Hello.
Hey, Dhammika.
Can you hear?
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Unfortunately, we lost the link with Professor I.M. Pandey, and he will continue his speech later on.
He's with us now, I think.
Yes, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Now, Dhammika.
Hold on, I think I have some. I have a problem.
Yes, but we can hear you.
Dhammika,
I mean, I didn't have any issue so far.
Yes.
Or we can give a chance to continue. Professor Pandey, he's right now, sir.
Okay.
Right, I'm okay now. I'm okay.
Okay. Professor Pandey?
Yeah.
Well, this is one of those problems. My The power cut, certainly, it happens rarely in Delhi, but it was there.
Okay.
So I also,
You can continue.
I only a few minutes, 2-3 minutes I will take. I won't show that. I was talking that there are a lot of opportunities for us in India, which may be true for other countries. One as COVID now and the experience which we had so far, it's leading to behavioral changes in the consumption patterns. Actually, people will be focusing more on healthy food, medicines, and those kinds of things. They will also go online actually for a number of services.
Professor,
In India, many hospitals, for example. Hello.
Sorry for
in India.
Professor, we can't see your slide.
I'm not showing slides.
Okay, go ahead.
I thought I'll just speak because it's few minutes now.
That will be fine. Yes.
Because I was saying that there would be a behavioral change in the consumers' demand for the products and services. They will go more for healthy food, and of course, the health care products. Actually, now people will care more for those kinds of this thing. Also, they will move to online. Both actually, the companies as well as the consumers, more and more online. Now, even the of course number of hospitals in India, they have started online consultation, for example. So this telemedicine perhaps should grow up in India. Must pick up in big way, and then companies will find new innovative ways of doing business, because what they must have realized is that this thing has been happening every 10 or 11 years actually. And so it's not that and again, nobody knows about this COVID. All kinds of statements are made by doctors and researchers these days. And more companies will become IT enabled. In India, that particular thing had started. I think now it will fasten now. And then, of course, one big thing which everyone is talking in India is that perhaps there is an opportunity for India where the Chinese businesses, means the foreigners in China, may start moving to India. Now, but what we need in this process is we need a planned lockdown, very systematic planned lockdown, because COVID is not going to go away for next at least 3 to 6 months, maybe more. And then the relief package must be, actually this we were talking for last couples of days, and yesterday we saw, and actually the arguments were that if you don't, because even governments don't have funds, we said that we have a special act or provision in Reserve Bank that why don't you go for deficit financing? Of course, it will lead other serious economic consequences, like inflation will go up, but then you don't have much of the alternatives, and therefore you have go. So what government decided right now is to borrow money. So they will go for, I think, market borrowing, or maybe international, perhaps market borrowing, because people have money but to the government, they may give this money. And then they may go for deficit financing as well. So unless we take these steps, perhaps because relief will have to be increased, that packages. This is a poor country, a lot of poor people in this country. More than 60% people, around 60% are in rural areas. So these are the needed. So thank you very much. Sorry for that interruption, unfortunately, unintentional, of course.
Thank you very much, Professor Pandey, for the excellent presentation. And we were all delighted to see you and hear your voice. And thank you so much. Professor Pandey.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Professor Pandey, one more clarification. Now, when it is come to Sri Lankan economy, our domestic savings is just 22% from our GDP.
Okay.
And our investments is about 28% from our GDP again. So we have heard from some Indian TV channels that some of the big foreign investments who are now located in China are planning to move from China to India. For an example, Apple. So company planning to move from China to India, and Hyundai planning to come to India, and lot of Japanese investments who are located now in China wanted to bring their investments to India. So I believe, as you explained, it was now 5.3% economic growth, and you have nicely maintained more than 7.5% before that. And with all these investments, if at all India managed to bring down, so this may be another revolutionary development in the Indian economy.
Yeah, yes. Actually, that's briefly I had mentioned that you have expanded it.
Yeah.
And this is what most of the people are talking. So they are saying there is this great opportunity, and therefore Indian government need to have appropriate policies, and the bureaucracy should be minimized. Though it has been minimized, it has been reduced, but then I think still there is some bureaucracy in our country. So I hope this government perhaps is more open to these kinds of suggestions, so they will do it. So that's a good opportunity for us.
Yes. Thank you very much. Then I'm moving to Mr. Dhammika Nanayakkara, our central banker, who is with us today. So Dhammika, how does COVID-19 impact our economy? I mean, the Sri Lankan economy, and what are the strategic measures, short-term and long-term, have been taken to overcome this negative impact? Over to you, Dhammika.
Thank you very much, Professor Sampath, and good to see you after maybe 33 years.
Yes, sir.
I was one batch junior to you only.
How nice. Yes.
Okay. Nandika and myself together were together, and then your current VC, Vice Chancellor, we were together. Anyway, first of all, I really want to thank you and your team for taking this lead in, bringing in some discussions into the table, so that a lot of new ideas will come in, and then we should be able to, assist policy makers to select the best suitable ones for the country.
Yes.
Now, going back to the your question, the area you want me to cover, basically, India and Sri Lanka, economies are very much similar, and in the sense, as far as the not in terms of the magnitude, but the issues two countries are facing. And Sri Lanka, as you mentioned at the outset, it's about $90 billion economy. And, before we come to the COVID impact, everyone would appreciate we had a legacy issue of Easter Sunday attack. And also, we had a 5-year of uncertainty in the past, political uncertainty, and then the policy uncertainty. And with that, I think the people had new hope by bringing in a new president into the office with some great hopes. And also, the people are expecting to bring in a new government into the office as well. Unfortunately, this COVID-19 pandemic, exploded, and basically that has disturbed the pursued policy path as far as the economy is concerned. Now, the COVID-19, I mean, if we look at the impact of the COVID-19, now, as you mentioned, now the country is to a great extent has been locked down, and then communities and businesses are not allowed to perform freely. So what it's mean, the central bank early estimates are such that the Sri Lankan economy would contract by about 3% in 2020. So that means in 2019, the economy grew around 2.3%, and then we would expect some negative growth in 2020. And how would that impact in various structures, sectors in the economy? Now, you mentioned about the agriculture sector, then industries and services, and then 25% employment in the agriculture sector, so and so forth. Now, in the Sri Lankan economy, number one, about 60% of the labor force is in the informal sector. 60% of the labor force, that's mean about 1.9 million, and about 1.9 million are day wage earners. Now, they are going to have a huge problem of managing their livelihood, and then the government is currently facing the huge challenge of making them available of some resources to manage their day-to-day expenses. And also, as far as the economic other economic impacts are concerned, now the country is basically facing a twin deficit since independence. Now, you mentioned about the current account deficit, and also the government is running substantially high budget deficit as well. Now, when it comes to the external stability, then we were basically managing our current account deficit largely through our remittances flow. And now, with the COVID-19 implications around the globe, we would expect the remittances flow to be affected to a great extent. And then also the tourism sector, the huge contributor to the national economy in terms of external stability is concerned, is going to be affected. It was anyway had a negative implication because of the Easter attack last year, but it showed substantial, remarkable, recovery. But unfortunately, with this, we would expect the tourism sector to take some time, and its recovery would depend on how the Sri Lankan authorities as well as the rest of the world is going to react as far as mobility of people are concerned. And basically, then foreign direct investments, I'm still discussing about the external stability. Now, the foreign direct investment flows are going to be affected because now, as Professor Pandey mentioned, almost all the jurisdictions are worried about their domestic liquidity. And even with, and also the people who have whatever excess liquidity are basically taking them away from these emerging market economies, including Sri Lanka, to safe haven, and then more liquid instruments like US Treasuries. Then you must have seen how the US Treasuries have behaved, and the 10-year US Treasuries trading, historic low right now. Then comes the ability of the government to go to the market, because Sri Lanka has been elevated to an upper middle income country, and then we don't have the fortune of looking for low cost financing, donor financing as we used to. Now everything is market based, and now when you look at the current yield rates of the international sovereign bonds issued by the government of Sri Lanka in the past, it's trading around 20 to 30%. So that means, so we are going to see some difficulty in the near term when it comes to external financing is concerned. However, like in the case of subprime issue after 2008, we saw with the development of 2008, we saw huge liquidity injection like what's happening right now in those developing countries. Now, for example, US 2 trillion and Europe, Japan, almost all the central banks are pumping liquidity into the market because they want to make sure that the market is adequately liquid. And I'm sure we are confident and we are positive that this liquidity, once we see some stability, some recovery from the COVID-19 epidemic, is going to again come look for high yields, and then is going to come to these emerging market economies for looking for high yields, and then we see some great opportunity there too in time to come as far as the deficit financing, external financing is concerned. But the issue is, it's too early for us to say whether it's going to happen in 3 months from now, whether it's going to be V-shaped or U-shaped or W-shaped. It depends on the action taken by the domestic authorities as well as international community. Then the next one, as I mentioned, our agriculture sector, the economy. When you look at the government side, the budget deficit, the government fiscal side, there again, the government is running substantially high deficit, and there is hardly any room for the government to intervene for the time being. Yet, along with the COVID epidemic, the government, even prior to the COVID economy, the government has brought in substantial amount of stimulus in order to turn the economy and then bring in the business confidence in order to stimulate the economy for better growth. And with the COVID-19, I think the government, though it finds not enough rooms, it takes almost all the effort in order to keep the day wage earners comfortable. And the government has taken several measures. Unlike in India, for example, the government has been able to convince the entrepreneurs. Now, March salaries, they paid March salary, they paid April salary, and then they also agreed to pay May salary as well. And then we can see some stability as far as the domestic SME sector, and then the service and industry sectors are concerned. Even though production is not ready to come in all of a sudden, but as far as the the unrest is concerned, the government would be able to bring in some stability, because from next Monday, the government is very positive that things can be unlocked step by step. And then we have great hope that we have been able to manage the situation, unexpected situation, to a great extent. And things will come in gradually. And we would be able to see some positive results since then. And the other thing I really wanted to discuss with you about the measures taken by the central bank and the government. Now, central bank, since the very first day of the epidemic, has taken several measures. Now, actually, when it comes to Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka has taken border control and health measures, and also fiscal measures, and then monetary and financial sector measures. If I may look at the monetary and financial sector measures, the central bank has been able to bring down the policy rate by 150 basis points, a substantial amount. And also, the cash reserve. Here in Sri Lanka, it's called the statutory reserve ratio. Now, the central bank brought it down by 100 basis points and injected about 65 billion permanent liquidity into the system. And also, the central bank has been able to maintain a large liquidity surplus in the money market by way of its open market operation activities. It's something around 180 billion again. And also, the central bank has injected roughly about 200 billion into the system by way of subscribing to the Treasury bills primary auctions. In the sense, now we have provided ample liquidity into the system, and mind you, part of it, more than half of it, has gone in the way of currency in circulation increases. Meaning the people have, unlike those days, people have started keeping substantially larger cash stocks in their pockets than before, meaning that those money will not be available into the system. If not the central bank's liquidity injection, the markets would have been experiencing a severe liquidity deficit, which would eventually result in substantial increase in rates and then the risk premia. And also, central bank, that's what the central bank has taken from its balance sheets. And also, the central bank requested the licensed financial institutions to take several measures. For example, a wide range of debt moratorium. And then basically it covers the tourism, plantation, IT and apparel, logistic providers and related SME enterprises. And then also the central bank started a working capital loan scheme. Central bank pumped in a 50 billion fund, and then now we are giving away loans up to 25 million for SMEs for working capital loans, for working capital requirement until they recommence their production capacities, and then the business start generating cash flows. And also, central bank has taken measures with licensed financial institutions to provide, to give away investment loans at very concessionary rates. Further, when it comes to personal loans and then individual loans, the credit card loan interests have been brought down, and also the pawning loans we brought it down substantially. And also, you may have seen same concession was given for leasing and hire purchases as well as personal loans taken by individuals, so that they also will have some breathing space during the COVID-19 period impact. They should be able to come back to norm. They can start servicing their loans and advances once the normalcy resumed. And also, I need to take a little more time of little more than what I've been allocated. Now, all will depend the Sri Lanka's resilience, to the impact of the COVID-19 epidemic will depend on how much buffers we have built as the economy is concerned. So basically, now you may agree the Sri Lankan agricultural sector is very much immune to the COVID-19, and the food security has been protected, and there won't be any difficulty as well as the food security and availability of required foods are concerned. And also, Sri Lanka has been able to bring in new opportunities. Now, for example, now Chinese outbound tourist market, the world's #1 tourist market, then we should be able to, now our health system demonstrated that it's one of the world's best health system, so that we should be able to market the healthiness of our system, so that we should be able to capture the Chinese tourist market, then East Asian tourist market, so that there will be new opportunities for the Sri Lankan services sector to build upon. And one important thing is April is anyway holiday season for Sri Lanka, and this coincided with the same period. And if you take it for any manufacturing sector, agriculture sector, or service industrial sector, now we have seen the April and first 2 weeks of May are somewhat, very low activities, and then the economy start picking up its activities starting from June, including tourism. And then I think we should be able to, because we the most importantly, we would be able to manage the volumes. Unlike India, in Sri Lanka, the very small numbers when it comes to population or any other thing, it can be easily managed. And also we have a robust government service system, starting from ministerial levels to the Grama Sevaka, the grassroots level of the administrative system, so that we should be able to maintain the orderly manner in such a way that even if we open up the impact, any second wave or any other impact, we should be able to manage it in a most efficient way without having much impact on the economy. Now I'll stop here, and I'm sure there will be more questions when it comes to Q&A session, and I should be able to elaborate on any specific area issue when time to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nanayakkara, for the excellent explanation about the Sri Lankan economy, and also the policies that central bank and the government have adopted so far to protect the Sri Lankan economy. You have nicely explained. I would like to just ask you, have you concern about small and medium scale our entrepreneurs, especially? Do you have any special protection policy for them to cope up their business again once we open up our economy? Do you have any sort of specific policies developed for them?
Thank you very much, Professor, for that question. When you look at the Sri Lankan corporate sector, Sri Lankan private sector, unlike in India, there are no large blue chips companies, and nearly 80% of the setup, the entrepreneur setup is SME, small and medium term, and then all the policies, the 4% working capital facility, debt moratorium, and almost all the policies, because almost all the policies that I have explained are geared towards SME sector. The government is also taking this is very seriously, because the workforce is basically engaged in activities related to SME sector. The SME sector is basically employing the workforce to a great extent. So I'm reiterating the point that almost all the policy measures that I have explained are very much geared toward SME sector of the economy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nandika Buddhipala, I hope you are online. Hello. Hello, Nandika.
Yeah, Professor.
Okay. Hello. Yes, Mr. Nandika Buddhipala. So, well-known practitioner in economics and finance, and we feel that you are from academia too, because you do a lot of lectures and doing a lot of research as well. So thank you very much. So straight away, I will go to the question. How does the banking and financial system cope with the current health crisis?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Professor. It's nice to kind of meet up with you all, and quite very much known people. And before coming into the discussions, I saw a lot of known faces also on the
Yes.
screen. And in fact, Damika mentioned that we are batchmates, and myself, Professor you, and even the Professor Vasanta, maybe we know each other more than maybe 75% of our lifetime, I think. Even Hasita, coming from the other end, we got to know each other maybe mid-90s or a bit earlier than that, even when he was not working for Brandix but somewhere else. Not going to mention which area, but he was pretty much engaged in the financial markets very much from those days onwards. And above all, it's my pleasure to catch up with the Professor Pandey, coming from the corner of our big brother, and then having very much similar kind of experiences over there as well. Maybe as far as the gravity is concerned, since the large economy with a huge amount of population, the complications and even the finance system supposed to be much larger than ours, and the complications also larger than us. So slowly coming into the professor's the question of how the finance system is going to cope up with. Maybe the first to start with, as far as the banking system and the financial intermediary in Sri Lanka plays huge role in the economy. It's slightly different to India. The professor, the reason is I don't have most recent statistics, but at least about when we look at market cap as a percentage of GDP, I always mention this, even though we are neighbors, India speaks for about maybe 75 to 80% of the GDP as market cap. Now it will have come down, ours also the same. There again, but same in the sense, but when we look at Sri Lankan market, our market cap as a percentage of GDP is running into maybe about 20 to 25, and it also maybe 1/3 of what you call India. They are again small market also compared to trillion of the dollars to 90 kind of the million, as Professor himself mentioned. So when we have the market, the stock markets and other markets, other financial markets are not really very large as such. Eventually it will become large, but at the moment, the financial intermediary banking system is playing huge role there in the entire economy. Then when we look at the banking system, the exposure of the entire banking system, rather than trying to talk on behalf of one bank, it's better always to talk about the entire banking system. When you look at the banking system, maybe about 23-24% of the total exposure, meaning loans and advances, are there for the personal loans and advances. And when it comes to construction, another 20%, trading, another 8%, agriculture and business, another 8%, then apparel and tourism, only 4% each. But the issue is, to start with apparel, my colleague, I know, the Hasita will quite well into it, but I just maybe to give one or two figures. When we look at apparel, maybe about 950,000 to 1 million, direct and indirect, both employment coming from there. I'm not going to explain how the situation is because Hasita is there to explain it. But there again, the earnings of these guys, income earners from that, is going to get affected. There again, as far as the industry is concerned, I think about 44 to 45% of our apparels are going to USA. There's no need for me to explain what the USA is going through at the moment. And there again, maybe about 15% to UK. Then Italy, another 7 to 8%. And Germany, another 6%. Belgium, another 4 to 5%. When we look at it, even though it's going to be this particular 4% of the bank exposure to apparel, look at the spillover effect. Now, when we look at maybe the behavior of the banking system, when you look at the people who are indebted may be running at about 23 to 25%. The personal loans and that category consumption, Professor. Definitely the employees of these will be in that particular category. Then the tourism. Tourism, of course, maybe direct and indirect employment might run into another 250 to 400,000. Then there again, there is no need for me to explain about tourism. The important factor is, Professor Pandey, about maybe 18-20% of our tourists are coming from India these days. And then the China is running into about 8 to 10%. And we have maybe about 3.5 to $4 billion coming from the tourism as well. So what I'm trying to say here is, when it comes to the banking, what matters a lot is how strong we are at the moment. When we look at certain parameters, the capital adequacy levels, the banking system in Sri Lanka as a whole, Tier 1 and Tier 2, both the capital levels are kind of at a very comfortable level. Then the second one is going to be the liquidity levels. As I think Dhammika very well explained, I'm not going to get into each and every. Now, when we look at it, the liquidity level by cutting down the policy rates, liquid asset the ratios, the reserve ratios by running from 5% to 4%, much before this particular incident took place. And then thereafter, cutting down the policy rates by maybe 100 to 150. Recently also, the Central Bank cut another 50 basis points. So allowing the banking system to play a role. Now, on the top of it, he elaborated on the moratorium and specifically the small-scale industries, how they are going to take care of through some of the concessions which are going to come through. All that is absolutely working well for the banking sector as well as for the economy. Now, the most important factor is going to be how long we can absorb maybe some of these pressures. Now, at the initial stage, I think the Professor Vasanta came up with very good example of how when the normalcy is going to come back. He alluded that it's going to be 2022, even 2023. Now, the issue is from 2020 now, it's running into maybe 2 to 3 years. But I think maybe the certain consensus might be slightly lower than that. Maybe by 2022, we might be able to get back to where we are compared to 2019 as a whole. I'm not really talking about the Sri Lanka, but maybe entire world. Now, the issue is, as far as the other issues that we went through throughout our lifetime, or maybe running from 1920 onwards, rather than those days, now the world is very much connected. And the world trade and the globalization and a lot of other factors, we closely knitted and brought together. I think quite interestingly, the Professor Pandey mentioned about Templeton. Templeton is not a new name to Sri Lanka even. They were in the equity market, they were in the fixed income market as well. And then that particular collapse during that time affected Sri Lanka also a lot. To tell you the truth, when you look at there again, I'm not only talking for my bank itself, but not only my bank. There have a number of banks where there are a huge amount of equity running into 5, 6, 7, 8, nearly 10% even, as I can remember some time back from the Templeton. Then Aberdeen. So these people much before what we experience here during certain stresses, financial stresses, they quit the market, not only India, but even Sri Lanka also. Now, there again, Dhammika explained very well the way maybe some of the investors used to quit the market when the FDI is not going to come through during the time where we are going through. Maybe one of the specific thing that we need to mention here is, Professor, even though it will take maybe 2022 or 2023 for us to come back to the level we are at the moment, the process is not going to be straight line. It's going to be gradual progress. So it does not mean there is the current prevailing situation is going to be there for another 2 years. No, it is gradually improving. Then the people who are in different industries, slowly they will get out of this lockdown, as well as they will come into mainstream of economic activities, and slowly they will progress. Now, the most important thing is for us to look at during this kind of period, the various facets like liquidity, the capital adequacy. Then specifically we know, even though the liquidity can be there, when we look at the behavior pattern of the consumer behavior, Professor Pandey just mentioned about it. When it comes to these kind of the pandemic situations, maybe one of the better things is for us to look at what really has happened in China very recent past. And I think you can hear me well, is it?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Now, the maybe Sweden and one other country as well as China just got over, not really got over, but their stage in the pandemic is slightly ahead of us. Now, we have seen in China, the manufacturing started picking up a lot. But quite unfortunate thing is the tourism and the restaurants and the leisure industry is not really picked up yet. And the slow progress was like, still they are getting hit in that area. So as banking, what we need to do is to see which are the stress points, how long these stress points are going to be there, and how we are going to absorb these the stress points time to come. And during the time of progress, slowly in each and every stage, always we need to do the certain studies to see where we are. Central bank also these days asking for a lot of information because they want to keep track of what is going on. Maybe it might take some more time for us to get much more clarity and give good information feedback to central bank also. Each and every week, I think the situations are going to get a bit different to each other, and then our feedback to the institutions, regulators are going to be a bit more clear each and every week time to come. Then as far as banking system is concerned, I need to kind of mention maybe one or two things. One specific situation, even before we come into the pandemic, as correctly mentioned, the most of the speakers, the tourism had a bit of a downturn, and we were just going through it, and we were kind of trying to recover it. And then when I look at one of the parameters, what I look at is household indebtedness. Household indebtedness is a significant kind of factor for Sri Lankan economy because that gives you the indication of households, how they are stressed. Even now as we speak, about maybe 22 to 25%. Bank to bank, this is different. But the entire banking system has having exposure to households and the consumption type of lending. Now, household indebtedness, what I have seen in the recent past, we were so happy about it. Meaning, maybe about 5-6 years back, household indebtedness from 27-28%, it has come down to 21-22%. We were really thinking now the time has come because as far as the economy is concerned, the consumption plays a huge role. Now, the consumption maybe, as Professor Sampath just mentioned at the beginning, he was talking about the investments and the savings. Once you remove the savings, all other percentage, like maybe 70% is going into consumption, maybe 60%, even more than that. So the issue is when the consumption is going to slow down. Normally during this kind of situations, what we can see temporary, even though the money supply is there. Central Bank of Sri Lanka has been, not because they are the regulator, because the Amica is there, not because that I'm saying so. They have been very proactive. Even before the pandemic, as he correctly said, they have taken a number of measures. And because of that, the liquidity has come through. And then they are again, as soon as the coronavirus hit, they reduced the buffers, capital buffers they build up by 1% for the two banks, that is Bank of Sri Lanka and the commercial bank, and 0.5%, 50 basis points for the other banks to absorb the current situation. We quite expect to talk about the reality, we expect NPAs bad loans to get into a worse shape moving forward. Then on the top of it, what we expect is maybe it is something to do with the repayment. When we look at the moratoriums as well, there will be certain kind of the period where the repayments are going to get muted. When the repayments are muted, there will be issue as far as the banking system is concerned. But I think by looking at the behavior pattern as well, people tend to not to spend. They are again not a good thing, but still, when the people's savings are going to be there, finally all this the money injected into the system finally will directly or indirectly roundabout way, it is going to come into the banking system. So as far as the liquidity is concerned, we have that particular the momentum at the moment, maybe for a short period of time. Then as far as the currency, the foreign currency is concerned, we had certain concerns, and some of the issues the central bank intervened, and maybe so far we don't have serious issues. Now, most important factor is going to be how long that we should be in a position to absorb all these pressure. Because it's reflection of the economy. As far as the banking balance sheet is concerned, it's kind of reflection of the entire economy. We are lending to the economy. Then other side is we are there. Even central bank is there to protect the interest of the depositors. So we are in the middle with the central bank as well. So we are taking care of the financial system. We need to take care of the depositors. For that, we need the income to pay them off. Then we have the shareholders other side of the coin. Even though market cap as a percentage of GDP is running into maybe 15%, now it may be less than that. But still, the banks, the commercial bank, HNB, the Ceylon Bank, Sampath Bank, all the banks. When you look at the highest market caps in the country, in the first 10, 15, 20, all the banks are there. Most of the banks, except because the Bank of Ceylon and the People's Bank is not there because they are not public voted. Otherwise, they would have been the top. But now the issue is the shareholders' interest as well. Keep it kind of very, very short. The important aspect is going to be what amount of NPAs are going to come through, what amount of muted top line is going to come through the banking system, and how long that we are going to absorb it. What is the capacity as a system for us to absorb it? Then always keep in the mind the central bank will go through it each and every week. The way that they pass information, but obvious to us that they are really going through it and they are trying to be the best of the situation. And then we feel if there are stresses coming through, then in the interest of the economy, in the interest of the country, in the interest of the financial system, we always believe the central banks. So they have to take care of and manage the situations if the banks are running into stresses or whatever. But at the moment, we don't have those kind of issues. There again, I'm stressing the fact maybe for the third and maybe fourth time. The important factor is going to be how long the situation will prevail, how long if we can get out of it in the short run, it's going to be much better. Early expectation maybe 2 months to 6 months we will be able to get out of it. If you are going to still be in the slow growth kind of situation, then if the NPAs are going to pick up, how we are going to manage is the kind of thing that we need to kind of look at very carefully each and every the month which is passed by. But at the moment, the absorption capacity, as far as the revenue, as far as the stability, as far as the environment is concerned, that is there in the Sri Lankan economy and the financial system. There again, to tell you, the Professor Pandey, specifically as far as India is concerned, I know their NPA is much more higher than the Sri Lankan banking system. And then when you look at the entire ownership of the first maybe 10, 12 banks, Indian banks, they are almost owned by the government, unlike here. It's only 2-3 banks which are owned by the government. So even though we are very small, maybe our absorption capacity at the moment quite okay, and we are looking at each and every possible opportunity to support the specifically the customers, both the sides, not only the lending but even the deposit side as well. And so evolving the economic situations, we need to keep in mind. We need to assess situations each and every time when it's going to change. So if you are going to get out of the situation by maybe after 6 months, as the Dhamik also feels, I think we should be able to absorb the pressure coming from, and we can cope up with the situation in the banking system.
Okay, Sampath.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nandika Buddhipala, for the marvelous explanation. So luckily today we have a representative from Central Bank of Sri Lanka and also from a commercial bank. So not only that, our other panelist is highly important because he is representing manufacturing. So Brandix is best of the best companies in our country who gain a lot of export earnings to the nation and providing a lot of employment, and they are the people who have created this Sri Lankan investment in foreign countries as well. So I hope Hasita is listening. Hello. Vasanta, I think Hasita is online. Hello, Hasita.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. So straight away, I will go to the question.
Yes.
Thank you very much. What are the challenges faced by apparel industry during this crisis, and what strategies are used to face those challenges?
Thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts, Professor, and the team. So first of all, I think apparel is one of the industries which got impacted by this situation very early in the day, and then impact was also quite severe as we progressed. So when I say early, we started to feel the impact as early as January, because when China went through the initial COVID-19, at that time it was called Corona. There were a lot of challenges in terms of the supply chain side, because we import about 50% or 53% of our fabric requirement to the country from China as an industry. So China plus various other countries, but China is the majority. So when China got impacted and China went into a lockdown, there were a lot of challenges in getting down the raw materials. So first, for the industry, it was felt as a supply chain impact, and moreover, for people like us in this region, we were actually benefiting because buyers were also looking at de-risking China and moving some of the orders in the supply chain to this part of the world, including Sri Lanka. So that way, that's how it started. So we initially felt that, okay, there was a supply chain challenge, but there will be more orders that will flow into the country. And that continued till about March, actually till about early March, until the virus started to spread to the West, where Europe as well as the US. When that came in, suddenly we started to realize, I mean, obviously we were seeing this impact and we were making plans to prepare for it. But still for all, there were some clear indications that the demand is going to come to a reduction, if not a standstill. So 17th March, when things were out of the world, right? It sort of turned supply chain problem to a demand problem, so orders problem, getting orders. And then within 2 to 3 days, when the lockdown happened, it became not necessarily a demand problem only, but it also became a capacity problem, because we virtually had to shut down our factories completely, both in India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh, and even in Haiti for that matter. And that gave a significant impact to the whole supply chain, because we kind of came to a standstill. Our buyers didn't know what exactly was going on and how to respond. They had to shut down their stores. And when they shut down the stores, as their foot traffic reduced and their buying reduced, obviously they had to pass that on to us. And the immediate message that came to us was that stop producing, just hold it then and there. That was the message. So we had to pass on as apparel manufacturers down to our supply chain, the fabrics and other accessory manufacturers. So the whole supply chain came to almost a standstill for about 10 days, I would say. And after that, of course, during this period, we were proactively looking at a few things. First thing that we did was we started to talk to our customers regularly, every day almost, and every day the messages and the feedback that we were getting were keep changing. Today, if you get one thing, tomorrow another thing, and tomorrow, day after tomorrow, nothing. And what was heard yesterday to today was almost quite different, and what was yesterday technically didn't have sometimes too much of value. So essentially, what it meant was that even the buyers didn't know what the hell was going on, and they were taking a step back and looking at things to see how to figure things out. But good news is, after about 10 days, things started to stabilize in the buyer's eyes. They somewhat figured out what was going on, and we were at least trying to get more consistent messages on the order book and what kind of order patterns are going in. So essentially, during that 10-day period, we had to tighten ourselves. On one side, we looked at our accounts receivable and the account payable, and looked at how to tighten those and match those to ensure that there is no immediate cash crunch. And then we looked at our inventory. As a manufacturing organization, we'll have a large portion of inventory that we carry. So when the sales are suddenly zeroed, we have a huge inventory that we are carrying, which is backed by working capital funding from the banking side. So we had to speak with the bank and get the extensions for the working capital, especially for the inventory side of things. And then gradually we started to keep talking to the customers and understand how they could really pick up this inventory, because we make to order, which means that we have all the inventory we have our confirmed order that was given by our customers. So there was a legal liability. But having said that, it was not the time to talk law, because we had to talk to the customers, and with the relationships we had to share the problems of each other and sort it out. So we had to answer your second part of the question, which is how did you respond? So with that impact, immediately we looked at the response in two stages. First, the short term, and then the long term. The short term was, I would say, about a 6 months horizon, from April going up to about October. How should we play? And then beyond that, more the medium to long term starts from there. How should we play? So the first side of the response, like what I said earlier, match the AR and AP, look at the inventory very carefully, and tighten the cash flow, because cash is the king in a crisis. So obviously, you have to stay liquid, and you have to have the cash flow as an overall pattern. And then in the meantime, we looked at how do we look at alternative measures to get in. So one thing that made us very clear is that the apparel demand globally is likely to come down significantly. At the time, the estimates were about for the 12 months period from the start. On average, the overall apparel market might shrink by about 40 to 50%, which is quite sizable, and it could be even more for certain categories. For example, outerwear categories will have a lesser sale, whereas underwear and maybe sleepwear type of categories, which people anyway have to wear whether you're at home or office, will probably have a better demand than the others. So likewise, when the demand shrinks, then the next question is, what do we do with it? So obviously, first reaction from our side was that we started to scout around the market, and we found that the personal protective equipment, particularly the masks and the hazmat suits demand, was ballooning at the time. I mean, everybody wanted a mask, everybody wanted in the hospital hazmat suit, and because of that demand pickup suddenly was abnormally going up, and we latched on to it as an industry and immediately converted ourselves from traditional fashion or commodity apparel makers to become these PPE producers. personal protective equipment producers. So good news is that, as I think the larger players in the industry like Brandix, MAs, Hydromony, Hella Clothing, and few of the others managed to latch on to that and grab orders on masks and other related products, which came in very early in the situation, probably somewhere around early April time onwards, and then we started to look at how we need to start our operations to make these products and sell and generate some cash flow. So immediate shift in the product portfolio was important. I don't know how much of the SME sector was able to respond, but as an industry, I think the few larger companies took orders in excess of their supply and the capability and the capacity and started to outsource, which helped the smaller players in the SME sector also. And we are today, as we speak, from Brandix, we are using about a few factories in the small and medium scale size and outsourcing our production requirement as well. So good news is that immediate reaction gave us a little bit of headroom to get more orders, and we didn't have to go into rash decisions of capacity reductions, etc., too early, because we had the ability to come through these alternative products like the PPEs. So apart from that, other responses, like now one of the other things is that importing of clothes to Sri Lanka is also banned at the moment. It's restricted, and probably it might continue for a little longer than 3 months, or maybe for a little longer period. So if that is the case, when Sri Lanka opens up, some of the retailers in Sri Lanka will need clothing. So we might be able to look at how to sell some of our products in Sri Lankan market as well. So likewise, same within India, we have a large scale manufacturing in India. We have a 1,000-acre apparel special economic zone in Visakhapatnam, which employs 21,000 people. We export about $350 million per annum from that particular facility. So this facility also had to come to a standstill on 20th of March when the lockdown in India was announced. But good news is that while we were in the lockdown in both in Sri Lanka and India, we were able to slowly start our operations with a very small number, maybe 50 to 60 people at each location, with all the safety measures that were taken, the fumigation tunnels, we bought in thermal cameras and other measures, and started slowly. And then by April 22nd, we were able to bring people to our factories in Sri Lanka. We operated about 10% at the start, but today as we speak, we have reached about 45 to 50% in Sri Lanka. And India, we are still at about we started very small last Monday, but within the week we have increased the numbers to about 10 to 15% level, and our plan is to take it even beyond that. So the important thing will be how we are going to gradually build up. Like Nandika said, it's not going to be something that suddenly booms and comes and goes. This will be a gradual pickup. So we will have to have that stamina to gradually build things up and escalate the curve, which means that surely we have to have little stronger balance sheets to weather the storm as well. And the banking sector has been quite supportive. Debt restructuring for most bank companies is absolutely crucial. But if I speak for the SMEs, I think small and medium companies, the challenges are much bigger there in this sector, because April salaries were paid, but then again, March salaries were paid. April onwards, even the salary payments in some of the smaller companies have been a challenge. But companies like Brandix, MAs, Hydromony, all of us took salary cuts at the executive level very early, and we took some tough decisions early, so that we won't burn the cash out. So those were some of the initial responses that we had. And now what we're doing is really assessing the market to understand what kind of a permanent damage or permanent reduction in the demand that will come. And if so, what are the alternative channels that we need to use? Like online sales are doing quite well, and it will continue to do well in the next few months. Then supermarkets are still working. So those sales through supermarkets for apparel is also going reasonably well. So how do you focus on those? Asia is not as bad as the West at the moment. So some of the Asian markets should be focused. So these are some of the lines that we are looking at the moment to see how fast and quickly we can respond to ensure that we don't have too much of an issue. But of course, unfortunately, it's inevitable for the industry as a whole to hold the entire capacity, because there will be some capacity drops that has to come, because if the demand is going to come down on average about 40 to 50%, the capacity also has to be reduced to some extent. So that reduction will definitely create some factories, some companies to reduce their workforce in the coming weeks and months, which I hope that we can extend as much as possible with this PPE type of demand that we have. But having said that, it's important to understand there will be some capacity reductions also that will come in.
Sampath.
Thank you
can
very
hear
much,
me?
Mr. Hasita Premaratna, for the wonderful explanation about the industry. So, Brandix, as I said, best of the best companies in our country. And Hasita, so Brandix invested $14 million in Bangladesh. So you have foreign investment in Bangladesh as well. But Bangladesh economy is doing very well at the moment. Their growth rate and infrastructure development, all these are in a rapid development phase. So I would just like to know how Bangladesh and Sri Lanka distinguish as business economies, how we, cope up with the COVID-19 post-conflict level, the development.
Yeah, I think Bangladesh is a fairly large apparel exporter. They export about close to $30 billion, which is about almost 5 to 6 times of our export. And of course,
Yes.
the population is higher, the poverty levels are higher. So industry operates at a cheaper labor force. And the capacities are much larger than what we have in Sri Lanka. And a lot of commodity buying, especially at the low priced products, are coming out from Bangladesh. Now, when we look at the current situation, Bangladesh numbers, the infected numbers are relative to the population, at least reported numbers are quite low. But we have about a 5,000 people factory there, and we have invested into expand that factory further as well already. But worries us at the moment is whether the testing, aggressive testing, is happening. The numbers that are being reported, are they real? I mean, the actual numbers, or whether there's anything that's been missed out. So that's something that worries us. Whereas in Sri Lanka, I think the efforts have been fairly coordinated, and at least we have clarity on where the social distancing should happen and what areas to quarantine, etc. But that level of coverage has not been in Bangladesh. So if you specifically ask the question between Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, what's the COVID-19 impact and how will we come out? I think Sri Lanka, we are coming out with a more structured and organized approach. Right now in Bangladesh, we are not seeing it at the same way, but I am sure that the Bangladesh government will also respond accordingly. But right now there is more there could be more cases which are not being reported, but that's on the starting operations point of view. But from the demand perspective, there is no doubt that Bangladesh will be significantly impacted like us, or even more, because the demand will shrink, and as a result, a lot of companies might not be able to pay their salaries. So that's what is the situation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. After listening to you, we feel that we have good oxygen in Sri Lanka. We thought, we don't have such, but thank you very much, Hasita. So, Professor Vasanta,
Yes.
now
Yes,
over
time-
to you
Yeah,
for
no.
question and answer. Yes.
I think the time is going very, very fast.
Yeah.
I think we have to give a chance for the audience. They are waiting. There are a lot of questions
Yes.
to the Facebook and chattings. But before moving to that, I want to ask one question from Hasita. Hasita, what was the role that you played as a head of finance when managing the finance resource of your company? Particularly, whether the traditional finance theories would help to understand assess and manage the impact of current COVID crisis?
Yeah, I think, Professor Vasant, the main thing here is that the crisis, like what I said, cash is the king, and finance is controlling the cash in the company. So the role of finance becomes significantly important in a crisis like this, and the immediate response in a structured manner was critical. So just to share some things that we as a finance outfit did at Brandix in this situation. So first, what we did was we looked at our accounts receivable and the accounts payable, and tried to match the account receivable and payables by restructuring our payment plans, etc., to our suppliers, because most of our buyers came and asked for extended credit, and there were a lot of differences that were coming in terms of the cash receipts as well. So we had to do a lot of work at the beginning to get the AR and the AP matched, and then as a team we had to also work with the rest of the business teams to see how the inventory has to be flushed out, and then also to understand what kind of working capital funding is stuck in the system and for how long, and then accordingly speak to the banks, explain to the banks the situation, and get the adequate type of cover and the stretch of the banking lines to ensure that we don't suddenly go into a liquidity crisis. So that was a very important role we had to play. And parallel to that, immediately we had to play a very active role as finance in controlling the overhead, because first the cash flow, then the P&L. The P&L, when you talk about what's coming ahead, we had to ensure that the overhead, the future overhead, is being controlled. So that's where the salary cuts had to be discussed, structured, and every single overhead line item we went through line by line and looked at during the lockdown period when the factories are shut, what will be spent, and what are the scenarios that will emerge when the restart happens. Obviously, restart happens with social distancing and other controls, which means that we can't operate at 100% immediately. We'll have to do a gradual build up to that, which means that obviously we will have to spend our overhead very carefully. We can't go back to 100% just as we start post lockdown. So essentially what that meant was that as finance, we had to take a very strong view and take that message across to the organization, that from overhead control, from a P&L perspective. Third one is from the balance sheet. Right now, balance sheet is also equally important, because in a crisis like this, suddenly when you wake up tomorrow morning, your assets and liabilities will have a very different valuation compared to what it was the day before. Right. So while we first focused on the cash flow statement, then we looked at the P&L, and thirdly, we looked at the balance sheet and looked at the asset base and the liabilities, and like what I said, looked at how we need to match the assets and liabilities in a more practical way, not just for the month or two, but looking ahead for 6 to 12 months horizon. Because it's important that when we come out of this storm, right, we should have a balance sheet that is bankable, that is sustainable, and that is financially stable. So that's something that we restructured immediately to ensure that we kind of gave the framework in. I'll just take one more minute on this one. Okay. After cash flow, P&L, and balance sheet focus, then the next thing is to guide the organization with some financial planning and projections for the future, more like a long range planning and a 1 year view, because budgets are out of the window. What we had earlier, we need to now throw them away and relook at. And I don't want even to call it a budget now, but we rather call it more financial projections and align the wider organization towards that. And it's a very difficult decision, because health and safety on one side says that don't do it, right? Don't start, delay the start as late as possible, because more you stay at home, lesser the infections. But on the other side, we are a business and we have to all live and pay salaries and meet the expenses. So you need to start as well. So it's a very difficult decision when you talk about health and safety versus the financial requirements. So the balancing between the two very sensibly at the beginning was crucial. And even now we're taking a financially prudent approach in the end and giving priority to health and safety as the main criteria, and ensuring that the financial projections are done in such a way that it kind of doesn't go too overboard too aggressively, but it does give that health and safety priority when we are trying to restart and get back to the new normal. But obviously the new normal, identifying that new normal is critical, what it will look like in 6 months time and 12 months time. And that's what we're doing right now. So we're working on a lot of scenario planning and assessing the long range plan to revisit and see how best we need to take. And final point is, these are the times where the controls are also equally important, because frauds and other related issues can come during crisis, and they can emerge stronger. One of the other important things as finance communities to ensure that the checks and balances are retained. Of course, they need to be relooked at. If they need to be flexed a little bit, policies may have to be changed immediately. But having said that, the emphasis on the checks and balances and controls have to remain as vigilant as any other day. So those are the key priorities as a finance team we took as we progress more as short-term as well as long-term measures.
Okay, Asita, it's wonderful explanation. From your explanation, but I realized that under this crisis, it's very, very hard to use, very, very hard to manage your finance resources according to the traditional way that you went to the out-of-box way you move. And next, I move into, based on that point, I move into the Professor Pandey, he's my finance guru. I want to direct.
If you don't mind, I will have to excuse myself because of the.
Yeah, I know that you said that you want to be.
Thank you very much for inviting. I hope the discussion helped, and I'm sure that the rest of the panelists will take things forward. And all the very best. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your.
Thank you very much.
Accepting your invitation, and thanks.
Thank you.
And I'll move into the Professor Pandey. So what we taught in the class, normally we learn the traditional theories. So this question, to what extent the traditional finance theories would help us to understand and assess the current economic crisis or fallout?
Oh,
okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay, now unmuted. Okay, good. Actually, Mr. Hasita has responded to some extent. Now, what are these traditional, what are theories of finance? Actually, if you're talking about these quantitative theories, let me give you a little brief data from India. We were talking about financial markets and stock exchanges in India, maybe in Sri Lanka. Now, do you know that how much of household savings goes to the stock markets? In India, 27% is in traditional banking savings schemes. We have compulsory, or rather voluntary also, savings for after retirement, provident fund and public provident fund. So 11% goes, 5% goes there. Insurance products, 5%, and deposits into bank goes around 16%. So around 27, 28% goes there. And how much goes to the stock market? Stock market goes only 4.6% of household savings in India. Actually, this share of property, when I was talking about real estate, it's a very critical sector for India. It's a 54%, which goes to property. So that's what it is. So equity is around 5%, you see, and including mutual funds. All right. Now, our finance theories, a large number of them are oriented towards the financial markets. Of course, that includes foreign exchange markets, commodity markets. I didn't talk about that, of course. While the day-to-day financial management is what Mr. Harshita just mentioned, actually. I know by my experience on the boards of companies, I was on the boards of 6 very large public sector companies and one company in Thailand. I was also on the board of a mutual fund and plus one financial institution, IFCI. Now, look, what these people are looking for is day-to-day cash management. So which theory? So in finance, what we talk about, risk return, value, leverage, okay? Thus, risk becomes a very critical factor. And one thing which I can say, of course, teaching-wise, we teach all kinds of models. But I think, interesting thing to know is that one thing is very certain, which is uncertainty. And you may have any kind of model, it just goes fat when all of a sudden something happens, because it's very difficult to anticipate many things. We call it unknown unknowns, unsungs actually in science. There are known unknowns. There are unknown knowns actually, see. So I think we must focus that in the class when we are teaching this model. And I personally feel a lot more emphasis must be given to the working capital management. Actually, in our MBA courses, people just devote few sessions, you see, and they don't take them to the reality of the word, actually. And most of the time, the research is again dominated by financial markets research, actually. You see, so the finance professors, I think that is the approach which we use, which we used in IIM Ahmedabad. It's a case based. These are Indian cases. We wrote there some 3,000, 4,000 at that time when I took retire. Actually, I took retirement from there. I was spending 25 years. And then I went to AIT and all kinds of places. Now, so where we use cases, case of real companies, Indian companies, American companies, mostly Indian companies we have written, large and medium and small. You go to the small, you see, and then you find that what kind of models they use. They don't use any models. So it is liquidity which become important, what we call reserve capacity of a company. And the moment you become highly leveraged, you are really getting into the risk part of that. Time and again, this has been proved. So focus on leverage, over leverage, for example. Focus on this kind of uncertainty which can't be predicted, for example. Focus on a company called PHEL, partner also. So all kinds of things in the industry happen. Now this company, where do they supply? They supply to the electricity boards in India. Of course, now we have a lot of private, and they don't pay money. You see, they are state-owned. Okay, and BHEL earlier it was state-owned. Now, of course, it has been partially privatized, quite a lot, in fact, and still they will face a problem. So there is no solution. You can't stop supplying to them. At the same time, you won't get your money. So they have to think of a different kind of management.